right. I guess since I have 3 videos of these, at least today, you could call this an ongoing series of, actions meet consequences. And the first one we're going over today is transgender woman brutally abused in jail wins landmark settlement. Now, obviously, I hate to read the first part of that sentence, but good to know that justice was served. All right. When Deanne Littre, and trigger warnings for just overall ickiness, specifically sexual assault. So, when Deanne Littre, a trans woman in New York, was arrested after she called the police during a domestic incident at her home, authorities at the county jail tore her wig off, subjected her to a cavity and strip search, sexually abused her, and housed her with male inmates. Because that's how you treat victims. You victimize them more. Yeah, that's great. Of course, it was because she's trans. She was arrested, she said, after the responding cops misgendered and verbally abused her, stating, "We can't let you walk the streets looking and dressed like a woman." Why the fuck not? Number one, this is New York. I'm sure that her dress, even if she was cisgender and just a drag queen, you've seen far weirder shit in New York. And you're telling her that she can't dress like she feels? All right. I'm not sure why they turned their ire to her, considering since she was the one who called the police to begin with. That night when that happened, it completely changed my life, Littre told City and State. When I was in the jail cell after the assault, I wanted to die. That's how horrible it was. I don't blame her. That's just really freaking horrible. You call the cops in hopes that they will help you, and they even probably become worse abusers than whatever the incident was that you called about. That's just horrible. She's won a landmark lawsuit in the aftermath. After her arrest and assault in 2017, Littre filed a lawsuit against the Watertown Police Department and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. Under terms of the settlement, both entities have been mandated to prevent discrimination and violence against transgender, non-conforming, non-binary, and/or intersex people, which they have given the helpful acronym of TGNCNBI. Yeah, that's just way too, but still, good to know. I was abused because of who I am by those who were supposed to protect me, and I don't wish that on anyone, said Littre, who is represented by the New York Civil Liberties Union and Legal Services of Central New York. These settlements make me feel heard and will allow me to move forward with my life, despite the trauma I endured. Most importantly, they will put other counties and police departments on notice so that the abuse I endured never happens to anyone again. I wish I could say that that's the silver bullet that's going to prevent these attacks from happening, but it won't. I was lucky enough to survive this, she said, but other trans people might not be as lucky. Might? Just because we haven't heard it, I'm pretty sure there have been trans women who have died because of it. Actually, might not even be just trans women. The settlement mandates the Watertown Police Department adopt clear guidelines to ensure the proper treatment of TGNCNBI people, including the appropriate use of their names, titles, and pronouns. It also says the department must ensure that searches and booking procedures are done in a way that respects a person's gender identity and that disciplinary action be taken against officers in the case of sustained complaints of gender-based discriminatory profiling. Which is all well and good, but let's address the elephant in the room here. She is the one who called the police because she needed help. And instead, they victimized her. How about reforms that, the police don't victimize the victim? How about they actually treat trans people like human beings and instead of attacking her because she's trans, actually help her issue? Because I don't know what the domestic incident was, but it doesn't sound like, they did anything about it. That all they did was attack her because she happens to be trans. The Jefferson County Correctional Facility must also house TGNCNBI people consistent with their gender identities, with limited exceptions, conduct searches consistent with their gender identities, with limited exceptions, and ensure that jail staff respect a person's gender identity in other contexts, including names and pronoun use. Again, nothing about, and when a trans person calls you, treat their crime as if they were anybody else and not assume they're the bad guy? I mean, where is that in the guidelines? Also mandated is medical and mental health care free from discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation, including access to medical care for treatment of gender dysphoria and gender-affirming items. It's our position that every county and every police department should have a policy like this, NYCLU staff attorney J.P. Perry said. They really should be standard practices in this day and age in New York. The settlement comes as state lawmakers try to approve a long-stalled bill that would enact uniform training policies statewide addressing the treatment of trans, non-binary, and intersex people in custody, but the legislation has not yet passed. Again, I'm just waiting for when they'll say, and by the way, when someone calls you with a problem, a domestic violence incident or whatever it was, treat their concerns like they're legit until you find that they're not, like you do for any other call. The bill, sponsored by State Senator Julia Salazar, who's a Democrat, of course, would require correctional facilities across the state to implement policies similar to those that Jefferson County agreed to adopt. Salazar said a resurgence of anti-trans rhetoric, inspired in part by the Trump campaign and his Republican allies, has made reform even more urgent, and she had a message for people who support other fundamental rights like reproductive freedom but oppose bills helping trans and gender-conforming people. These fights are inextricably linked, she said. And still, I do not know. I mean, it sounds like from the brief description that she should never have been thrown in prison anyway. But at the same time, they don't explain how any of these policies are going to prevent trans people from being from not being believed when they call the police about an incident that happened. I mean, if I were trans, I wouldn't feel comfortable calling the police if I knew that they would just target me, that they would assume that I'm the offender. There is nothing in this article about why they decided she was the offender. Just that we can't let you walk the streets looking and dressed like a woman. But they don't say who the other person was. They don't say if they actually took the incident seriously or just booked her because they assumed she must be the instigator because she's trans. I don't know. And there is no link to the initial report. There is nothing. I would love to know. I mean, obviously, the way she was treated was horrible regardless. But we're missing the piece about whether, I mean, they mistreated her when they got her to jail, but they didn't say, and they obviously verbally abused her before, but they don't say, oh yeah, and if there's a trans person who calls about a crime, don't assume they're the perp. Nothing about that. Just how to treat them after the fact, after they've been arrested. So it's great, but maybe I'm missing something, but maybe, teach your officers that when someone calls in a complaint about an incident, maybe don't immediately attack them. I mean, this goes a long way, don't get me wrong, but it sounds like this is all after the fact and nothing that says that you should attack the victim. Now, maybe this is supposed to be implied in these new reforms, but I'm just not seeing it. Because this only helps if you arrest the trans person. But it doesn't say anything about believing the trans person. So it's definitely good. It's definitely a start. But how about, giving me more information so I know if she was the one in the wrong? Because we don't know. She could have been. And she was rightfully arrested and just treated like trash afterwards. Or she should never have been arrested. We don't know. Anyway, that is the end of this article. So with that, I will see you guys in the next one.